Hi guys, welcome to the video. Okay, so before we begin, let me just show you a few little snippets of the storm that we had that I mentioned in the last video. So I think she's searching for her toys. And actually, as I'm doing this voiceover, there's another storm that's just sort of come up more unannounced, but it's you might hear the winds outside have been ferocious, and it's been sub-zero freezing all day. So anyway, I hope you guys are faring okay as well. It's been a big winter. But so what I wanted to do every year to start the year off, I like to kind of have some nice thing to focus on. So this year I thought we would do kind of a watercolor refresher course. So if you're new to the world of watercolor, welcome. And if you have been doing watercolor for a long time, I hope this just kind of can give you a bit of a kickstart into some creativity. This is a painting that I was working on through the last storm, and we will talk a little bit more about this one towards the end, but it's kind of a fragment of an Orbison rug, and I wanted this to be kind of like the pale sort of sheen on the silk textured fabric rugs. So I've been thinking for a while kind of how to do that, and it is a very pale painting, but the purpose of this video is to kind of show you how to create the depth or strength in the vibrancy of the colors that you want to put down. Watercolor is such a fun at first, and then it can be quite difficult to, you kind of have to paint the picture two ways, first in your mind and then on paper. We'll also talk a little bit more about this. I did this just in 10 minutes in one of the storms as well. So but yeah, there are always kind of some nice tips and tricks on how to get the watercolor to kind of give you what you need, you know, so and how to do that in sort of as less passes as you need. So instead of kind of glazing and etc. Anyway, so we'll go into the first tip, and that is the tinting strength of your colors. So I'm going to show you two different blues here. One has a very low tinting strength and one is highly saturated. I often like to use colors with a very soft tinting strength. I'll show you how I use those, but you also may want the really rich kind of saturated color as well. So this one here is Daniel Smith Cobalt Blue, and the first one I did was Winsor & Newton Ultramarine Ash. And so hopefully you can see here that one of the problems with not getting the vibrancy that you're looking for could just be the tinting strength of your color. It might not give you that kind of boldness that you're looking for. This one here is Greenleaf and Blueberry French Grey Earth, I think it's that. And this one is a kind of deeper version of an olive brown, and this is Daniel Smith Greenish Umber, Greenish Raw Umber, I think. So you may feel like you're not being able to get the strength, the tinting strength that you're looking for out of the watercolor, but it could just be that is a very soft color. And why I like these colors, and I'll show you just kind of here a little fragment. Say we're working on a little a bit of a pattern like a rug or a bit of wallpaper. I really like using them as a base layer or the first wash, and you can use, like, so I could use the cobalt blue just with a lot of water and create a very soft fine wash out of that as well. And then you can see I'm just working into that. The power just went out. But where was I? But these very soft colours often will give you something extra. So for example, the green leaf and blueberry one has a little bit of grain, a little bit of texture that I really love in it. And the ultramarine ash, there's something really beautiful about. They also hold the colours quite nicely, so the colours are not necessarily going to disperse in them as much as some other pigments. And often they just have a very beautiful kind of quality, sort of a luminous quality to them. So the second thing I wanted to talk to you about getting more vibrancy out of your colours is just letting them rewet, or the rewettability of certain colours. So this one is Holbein Composed Green. It rewets beautifully on the first kind of touch, but you can see a lot of these colours need reactivating. So I just dip my brush in the water, and then if you have a good brush, it will hold the water. It won't drip on your painting or anywhere, and you can just take that water over and put that water on your colours, and you've got to let that sit for a minute to activate and reactivate those pigments. But some colours do rewet beautifully, and Schmincke is one, Holbein is one. This mint green, these are from Etsy. Anyway, I will link the brands that and the shops that have really. This is Michael Harding Ivory White. I think that his range also rewet beautifully. In the beginning, this was something I really relied on because I wasn't exactly sure how to use the paints and things like that. So, but then also sometimes, as part of the process, you just may really love creamy paints. I really, as much as I enjoy the process, I'm also looking for like an outcome that I want. So I'm quite happy to work on, rewetting them and kind of waiting till they're nice and like, some of the colours you've actually got to kind of keep putting a little bit of water on for a little while. It still may not be, they're sort of not as creamy as some of them. Like the green leaf and blueberry one, I might often have to kind of put water on that a couple of times, even to get it just to this soft kind of way that it is. But I really don't mind that because I absolutely love the end result. I love the way that it sits on the paper, the slight grain to it. It's just a really, really beautiful, and I think Thulight's a little bit like that as well. It will, or like Rosaline, it will also take a little bit of work to rewet, but you just get such a beautiful end result. So what we're going to do now is the same thing we did last week. We have put a few squares of kind of into a sketchbook, and we're going to do some little landscape vignettes. Last video I did sort of a more controlled wash around the edges, and this time I just let everything be more watery, more fluid, and kind of just let that have a little bit of a play with that around the edges. So, but we're going to do the same kind of idea where we're just going to put a cloud and then sort of a valley down below. But what I want you to think about is continuing to drop in colour. This is one of the crucial ways to get more saturated colours on the first pass. So I'll show you an example of a swatch of this in a minute, but for the meantime, it's just quite nice to kind of have a play with some of these like ideas, colours. Think about colours that you might like pairing together, and you can see there that I've just gone and reloaded my brush with more pigment and then dropped that in as well again. So you want to keep keep adding color. Now it can be the same color like we did, or it can be a different color as well. While we have this wash active, it's really nice to, sort of get as many colors or passes of the same color in there as possible, and that will help that to all dry to a really nice coloring for you. So at this point, I'm really just having a little play with color notes as well around the edges, just kind of thinking about things, again, dropping in different colors to see how they react to each other, to see how, how much flow is there or not. And yeah, just kind of using this little exercise as a nice kind of bridge into things that we're thinking about. And again, you can see a color with a low tinting strength. This is one that I make, but it's very similar to like a Daniel Smith lavender, which would have more tinting strength because this one actually has zinc white in it, which is a very transparent white. So again, you can see that I'm working over this sky and with several passes. I'm not just kind of putting the color on once. You can see I'm reloading my brush, I'm dropping in more color. And quite often working the painting like this on the first go will save you a lot of work later on. I was actually painting that Orbison rug the other night, and I yelled out to my sister, the best thing about painting? And she said, what? And I said, painting. And I said, the worst thing about painting? Painting. So that's where like these kind of exercises come in quite handy to increase your knowledge and kind of this database of what your colors do. And so rather than doing like a large painting quite detailed and then at the end of it you realize, I didn't get this right, or I'm not sure about this, or being disappointed in something, you've kind of already got these ideas about this color will perform like this will do this color's going to need a lot more work, this color looks wonderful, and sometimes like really nice, like you sort of get these color pairings that you hadn't really thought of, and then you're like, oh, that works great with each other, and so then you kind of can take that into a larger painting. I was watching a video about Sargent painting in the canals in Venice this week, and one of the things is he took his sketchbooks out into the boats, and his paintings are just so vibrant and really exciting. And part of that is because all of these types of things are second nature to him at that point. So he knows his colors, he knows what they can do, what he needs to do to get them to sing, to get them to work. And so these types of little exercises are really good for learning about all that stuff. So another way you can practice this, and I want to show you, so you can see here I've loaded up my brush, but I didn't load up nearly enough paint. So again, I've gone back in, I've reloaded it, and I'm doing the swatch. Now I'm going to leave this one like this, and sometimes I think that is possibly how we're painting and thinking we've already kind of put the color down. But let me show you the same thing, but I'm going to reload my brush, and then I'm going to drop in more color, and then I'm going to reload my brush again, and then I'm going to drop in even more color. You can see how that's deepening up just by continuing to add pigment in this stage into the wet wash. This is creating so much vibrancy. And then the other thing you can do is lift color out as well. We don't talk about that too much in this video, but we can talk about that in more upcoming videos. But you can see in the one on the right, even that contrast between, the added color that you can see like such a clear difference here. And then the one on the right, because we added so much more color and then we lifted a bit out, you've got already this higher contrast situation happening. And that's just by putting in some extra color, you know, in the beginning stages here. So even this one here, so we the sky had not dried yet, and I kept adding in color. And this is another good thing that these types of exercises will teach you: when the paper is too wet to keep adding in color, and when you can keep adding in color. So there's lots of little nice kind of parts of watercolor that really only experience can teach you. So certainly don't be disheartened or disappointed if it's not working out the way you want it. There's just these little tips that you have to implement, and then you start to immediately see better results. So in this one, obviously, I'm thinking about a night sky, and I love mixing granulating blacks with any blues, darker blues, brighter blues. It creates such beautiful effects. And then I'm basically using indigo for the mountains. And indigo is already a dark blue mixed with a black. So you're already getting that sort of inky darkness, but you can mix that again with a granulating like a lunar black or a Mars black. But you can also mix something like an ultramarine blue or a cobalt blue with a lunar black. And you get some really beautiful, or even like Daniel Smith lavender, just some of those types of blues, cerulean even, just can create some really beautiful effects. And then you could see that I lifted out some clouds in that one. So these were our paintings from last week, and then these are the ones from today. And hopefully you can see that even just from this little bit of extra work in adding the colour, that they're a little bit more saturated already without doing much of anything else. So the other thing that you can do once your painting is dry is go back in and glaze. We will talk a little bit more about this as well, but this is such a great way to intensify colour. And so I'm just putting in some sort of little shadows and rocky parts on the mountain there, but we talked a little bit last week about this. So we're doing wet on dry technique. So we've got the wet paint, we're working onto a dry surface, and just adding those details can also just really start to bring your painting to life, and you may not need as many parts of that as you think. And you can see here I'm also glazing a larger portion onto the sky, which I knew when I use that colour, even if I continue to drop in colour, I probably will need to deepen that up to get to the vibrancy I'm looking for. You can see here as well, I will often hold the tip of my paintbrush, kind of point it to the side, and then make little tree marks with it as well. So yeah, hopefully that is helpful. The next thing I want to talk about, we're going to look through do a quick look through of this book. These are some of Winslow Homer's watercolors. A lot of these, or maybe even all of his watercolors, were done on location. So this was an incredible feat. This was before there were cameras, and I mean, he is just doing some amazing things, like just capturing all of this. So, and you can see through this, you can kind of see that he has done some of these techniques we're talking about, dropping in more color, adding color and glazes over the top as it dries. When you see hard edges in the work, that's possibly when he's done the wet on dry. And then when there's soft edges, he's been working wet into wet. So these are also some like ink drawings. If we can get some bustle beach attire going, that would be epic. So the fourth tip is managing water. We will probably do a whole nother video about this, but like, look at the sort of glazes and these strokes that he's doing you know, as the other layer dries, he's adding these darker strokes into the water, into the reflections. Possibly it was quite hot when he was painting these, so that one wash would dry and then he's dry brushing kind of over the top, because you're seeing this like all throughout the work here. These are really kind of dynamic in the moment strokes, and it just makes it quite exciting. And you can see here, this is a close-up of the boy's hands as he's holding the oar there, so it's a good reminder that you don't have to do everything perfectly. You can see the lighter green, and then he's continued working on top of that and working into the sky as well. So I love the little bits of powder blue he added when the sky would have been dry by that time. So managing the pigment to water ratio on your brush is also, you know, another thing that you're kind of wrangling with while trying to paint. And again, it just comes through just experience. Keep working on it, and eventually it will become second nature. A really good rule of thumb, and I think a really good way to simplify water control, is, do you need more pigment or do you need more water on your brush? And often, you know, that's just a very simple way to figure out, like, I want it softer and more watered out, I need more water on my brush and less pigment. I want a more intense kind of like the blues that he's kind of putting over the top there, I need more pigment on my brush so I can damp my brush off on a paper towel and then, you know, use more pigment. So I picked this little painting to do a kind of master copy, just a small one of, and you can see he actually scratched out the paper there so he could put in the uniforms. But we're looking for the lightest area of blue, or lightest area on the painting, and we're just doing this very quickly, so you can give yourself like 15 or 20 minutes. I don't often like to set timers, but I do like to just do it before I know something else is coming up. So if I have to go get food off or something, I will start doing it. Then I know I am on a time crunch, but I'm not really pressured by it, because I can, you know, obviously come back later. But yeah, for some reason, if I set a timer, I feel like pressured. But anyway, so we're starting with the lightest color and value that we can see, which is this very soft blue, and we're starting to create a wet wash. But I'm also considering that he was in the elements that he was wanting things to dry. He wasn't wanting too much water on his paper, maybe. These are things that I'm thinking, you know, possibly. I mean, I can't tell for sure. But definitely I have found that as well, being out painting. I don't want really a full watery wash all the time on the page. So I'm looking at putting down that softest color, the first iteration of our sea. Then I'm starting from the horizon line, where which is the sort of brightest and deepest version of the color that I can see, and then I just start working my way back down towards the lightest, adding in waves. At some point I feel like I do, what I'm looking for when I'm doing these master copies is not to get an exact replica of what they painted. So at some point I kind of abandon exactly, you know, trying to get exactly their brush strokes and things, but I'm looking for how they may have put the painting together. So again, we've moved on to the rocks, and then I'm looking for the lightest value there. It's this kind of soft grey that I'm mixing up, and then putting, so you can see I'm kind of using like an indigo and a deep sort of brown, or like a violet earth. This kind of structure part, it has sort of a deeper value all round, so I just start putting that in, and then I can see these kind of deeper elements at the bottom here, these really shadowy parts. At this point I could probably move to a smaller brush for this kind of detail in this area as well, but putting in the darker sort of waves here, and again, so we're working kind of wet into wet, but some of this may be drying, so it goes on almost more like dry brushing, and well, some, you know, some of the white parts really have barely any water on them. And then again, if you were doing this more detailed, you could use a smaller brush, but I'm just looking for where he's kind of putting in these darker kind of horizontal stones. And something like this again is teaching us how we can work with this water, how we can drop in colour, and when we need to stop, and how much strength in that colour we can get in the first wash as well. How many different colours we can get in the first wash. Like here I can see some sort of burnt siennas in his shadows there, so I'm putting them in it as well now. And I did move to a smaller brush, and then I'm working back into the like the stone there, and yeah, I probably could have deepened up the shadows at the bottom of this rock face here before. I could have done a bit more, made that a bit darker by dropping in more colour, but again, this is the kind of thing you're learning, especially if you're doing it fairly quickly, trying to juggle all these things and figure all of this out. The sky is really soft, so I've just put a lot more water in with the same colours, you know, to get this very pale horizon. But like I said, all of this will become easier the more that you kind of work on it. What's really nice about something like this is that all of the compositional work and the sort of colours are done for you, and then you are just working on the techniques. How can I build the colours? How can I leave the light patches? How much I'm looking at the cobalt blue. There's really bright blues that it looks like he sort of does these last, and so I'm just going through again as well and putting these in, which doesn't mean that you lose your own style as well. Like I just have sort of a softer hand. I just paint a bit more in a delicate way, so you know, you don't have to change your style when you're doing a copy like this. And these are just for learning as well. This is not like for art that you would sell, but it's just really helpful to kind of look at something like that and be able to, you know, think it through. Then the next tip is to use other media with your watercolor if you're looking for, so say you've tried some of these things and you just still can't get exactly what you're looking for. This I did one night in the storm, and we're just going to do sort of a small tulip bulb. I'll show you. I used a pastel pencil to do the initial. So yeah, I used the pencil, the pastel, for the initial sketch, and then I worked into the sketch with watercolor and with the watercolor stick. So you may have other media like Neocolor 2s or Inktense, charcoal, or other things that you could work into watercolor with to increase the vibrancy. Even like Urban Sketches use fountain pens a lot, so they do line and wash drawings a lot, and you can move the ink with water, but I did not leave these. The other thing is, when you're using a watercolor stick, you want to hold it in the water about 3 times as long as I did. Again, you want to give it a minute to soften up. It's been just sitting there in this really rigid form. The 2 colours I used were the electric blue was the first one, and this one is the cobalt teal. And so I I basically just used those to kind of draw the inner parts of the petal. I washed that out with my brush, and then, you know, added the top kind of part of the actual watercolor around the edges, and you can see how I'm just adding a little bit of sparkle. And again, I'm just reloading my brush and dropping that in twice, even sometimes 3 times. If you feel like you have kind of overdone it a little bit as well, you can always lift parts out. So again, like, we will look at that in a whole nother video, but don't forget that that is also an option. But yeah, there's so many exciting ways to kind of use watercolor, combine it with other media, and really just enjoy that process. So the last thing we're going to talk about is glazing, and you can see here this was the first pass. Everything was still quite soft, and then I can come in and do some wet on dry and really increase the vibrancy of these details. Shh, it's all right. Hello. We have a visitor. Okay, so but I don't have to necessarily go over the whole painting. This is where it's really helpful to know what you want the underpainting or your first wash to kind of look like, and how intense you want that to be, because if you get that right, then the next layer or this next glaze may just be some minimal detailing to kind of finish it and to get it to that vibrancy that you're looking for. And really, this whole process is kind of this alchemy of all these little decisions in the arrangement of elements that kind of end up showcasing the painting, or like becoming your painting. Like even here, I know that the deepest parts of these roses I want to be softer than the darkest parts of like the sort of crest areas. So you know, those are kind of decisions that you make, and then knowing how to sort of get that painted again just comes back to trying these little things, knowing how much pigment, how much water, what your pigments do, dropping in more color in the beginning. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. Let me know if this series even is helpful. Next video we're gonna work on that blue tulip, a really large one, and some other exciting things. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Be safe. Bye.